Like to discuss the government and politics in China, beginning with the power, authority, and legitimacy. So, in dynastic China, basically the dynasties before we think of the modern China in its political sense, there were dynastic cycles where, like, a ruling family would gain power, expand their power, and then lose power. That's how it worked. They'd always try to maintain the mandate of heaven, make sure there's no disasters going on inside of the country. So, as long as they kept the mandate of heaven, they'd keep power. This, however, ended in 1911 when Sun Yat sen led a new thought of like republic of China against the old dynastic China. Later on, Mao Zedong took power in 1949. He instituted Maoism, the People's Republic of China, looking more towards the common person, more of a communist sort of ideal system, looking towards helping the common farmer, worker, and such. Now, the way the whole system in the People's Republic of China works or worked was through this mass line of, spreading up from the worker up to the ruling people or government officials in the country, and then back down from the ruling government officials in the country to workers. The Central Military Commission in the People's Republic of China controls the military. And then there was, following the death of Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping took control of the People's Republic of China, and there was Deng Xiaoping theory really took control in the country, and this is really a mix of maybe the authoritarian government style, maybe some communist principles, but also infusing some capitalism into that. And really, this whole communist ideal or this Maoism took aim at Confucian values, traditional Confucian values. It was at odds with them. And these values were like, you have to respect your ruler, respect older people. You have to, it valued some education and such things like that, where this Maoism looked to empower every single individual, every single farmer, every single certain person who lived in the country, a lot more egalitarianism and such. So the main reason the People's Republic of China originally did not like Western powers was because of the thought of the foreign devils, basically the countries who, during the days of colonialism, came into China, established ports, started to carve out parts of China for their spheres of influence and such. And that's something that did not benefit China and harmed them. And in order to set up this communist government, Mao Zedong had to go on this long march across China, where the Nationalist Party in China was trying to hunt him down until eventually they got into war with Japan. But yeah, just this large march around China. And the people who supported Mao Zedong on this long march were granted some governmental positions when the Communist Party took control of China. And there were many factions in the China, or in the People's Republic of China, especially towards, after the death of Mao Zedong. I mean, there, the Gang of Four, there were, conservative people who really liked the communist ideal, liberal people who wanted to maybe take a little of a step back from this full-on communist ideal that they were looking for. And of course, patron clientelism, support for the government, giving out rewards was something large that happened, or happened in the People's Republic of China. Now, looking more at the political and economic change in China, of course, the spheres of influence of those Western countries, really altered China as not being, a lot of its history was this large global power, where now it's not as much this global power because these Western countries are taking a lot of, well, not really power over every single person, but a lot of influence over the country, a lot of trade and things like that. The leader of the Nationalist Party, which did take control of China for a while and did fight the Communist Party for control of China, the Chinese Civil War, their leader was Chiang Kai-shek. And that's the idea of this two Chinas thing. You have the People's Republic of China on mainland China, then you have the Nationalist Party, or people refer to as the Republic of China on the island of Taiwan, and they're, two competing ideals, each one thinking that they're their own China and they control the other one and such. And that's really something that, has come up to debate recently about possible wars between both of them. There was some friendships maybe a decade ago, but now there's more talk about war between them. And then we got to talk about one of the centrists, Zhou Enlai, who really was one of these centrists after the death of Mao Zedong. Had an idea of a centrist China. Also, after the death of Mao Zedong, there's a focus on four modernizations. It changes from the way the country is built under Mao Zedong. There was to be focuses on industry, agriculture, science, and the military. Now, with the political culture and political participation in China, there is a lot of different groups and ideas of who leads the country. There are, of course, the ethnic group in China are the Han Chinese. Then there are the autonomous regions, especially in the west, in Xinjiang with the Uyghur people, and then for Tibet with the Tibetan people. The autonomous regions where they have a little bit more control over like cultures and such as a part of China. There's this process called like a new socialist countryside, which really looked to spread equality across the countryside, which looked to, help poor people in the country where, poverty is much more of an issue than in urban areas in certain aspects. There's the Youth League of the Communist Party, which has millions of members and is really one of the large growing arms of the Chinese Communist Party. Cadres are people who, worked in the Chinese Communist Party, did favors, and now are like crying up the ladder. And then there are technocrats with the background knowledge of technology, or trained in a technical background that, now are looking to take even more control of the Chinese Communist Party. There are also a growing number of non-governmental organizations. That number has gone up by a ton. Some counts have many of them, something that really didn't exist before. That's really a breakaway from the true communist state under Mao Zedong. Xinhua is the national media of China, which covers a lot of events, is state-owned, state-run programming. So that's one of the large medias where a lot of stories from China come from. And then Hukou is the system in which you can register to your residence. There are restrictions around moving in China, especially to control rural people moving to urban areas, where that is a large issue. A lot of urban areas, are very populated in China. So, the system allows less people, there's restrictions around those rural people moving to urban areas. It's easier for like well-educated people or people with a good talent to move, and then people who've paid this, I believe, the tax system for 7 years. It's a little harder, but you can get there. But yeah, that's just basically the system of moving residents in the country, really to control that rural to urban transfer of population. Looking at the political institutions of China, there were the political elites which control the country. Usually, these are high-ranking members of the Chinese Communist Party. There's more of a decentralization of China to give more power to the local governments. Of course, the Chinese Communist Party would control this, but it's trying to help the country grow in specific ways. The plenums are the meetings of the Central Party of China. Huangxi is a system of the patron-client network in China, trying to give out government positions for support with this, within China, but also the Communist Party. And nomenclatura is more of the system within China where you're helping everyone, or you're helping your political allies and such. Yeah. The institutions of government, there are these parallel hierarchies between the state of China, so the People's Republic of China, the government or the Communist Party of China, and then the military. So that's the main idea of the parallel hierarchies. You're still at the top of one, has similar power to the other two. I mean, you have dual rule between, leadership in the Chinese Communist Party and then leader in the state, or leader in the Chinese Communist Party and then leader of basically the government of China. Nationalist People's Congress is a Congress which approves legislation that is to take effect in China. It's chosen from more provincial people's congresses, and then there's more local, and that's the village councils where people can vote for a village council member, which then get picked on for more regional governments or local people's congresses. So it just goes up. And yeah, this is just the pinnacle of maybe a legislature in China. Xi Jinping is the current president of China, the president, vice president, a lot of power in China. And then you have the premier of the Communist Party, which also has a lot of power in China, which was formerly up until, I believe, around February of this year. But the former one was Li Qiang. Now, looking at the issues in China, there's the thing of a rule of law, which has become a lot more popular in China. China has to, have more of a legal system, especially as they trade with foreign markets, which, international trade, and which, these foreign investors want more laws protecting them. There are the procurates, which help to, be a part of this law. And then another important issue in China is the population question. There's the one-child policy after Mao Zedong, which families could only have one child, disproportionately male, because that's what's was favored in Chinese society. And then I believe in what really recently, it was either 2015 or 2016, it's now the two-child policy. Every family can have 2 children. You have democratic centralism, and you have more of like the economy becoming, a communist society, but you're infusing more of these capitalist items into it. You also have, payment, social security type for everyone, like welfare checks, help for the poor and such. And you have this with this iron rice bowl. Socialist market economy, basically, you have socialism throughout the state, but then you have pieces of capitalism mixed in. So, yep. There used to be people's communes. Around hundreds of families would live on a commune to work, but there was not a lot of labor being done. People weren't working towards the ideals that Mao Zedong had, so the people's communes they were disintegrated. There's now like the household responsibility system. As long as you grow enough food to help pay your taxes or stuff for the local support for the local village, and then your taxes to the government, you can consume or sell the rest that help to increase productivity in China. You have private business growth in China as a result of this more capitalist approach in China. You have township and village enterprises, which townships and villages still have to help fund these. So a little decline recently. Then you have this floating population, meaning all these, like I said, these rural people wanting to go to the cities. The Hoku system, is one of these systems that controls movement. But you just have these people that, it's much better prospects for the economy in the larger cities, so you will leave the rural area to go to the cities, but then there's all this population that doesn't have permanent homes in these cities, so it's just that floating population that moves from one area to another, from rural areas to the urban centers, and moves around those urban centers. Special economic zones to help grow industry, especially from foreign areas, on the coast of China, the eastern coast. A lot of those cities and areas, there are just places where Western countries can get Chinese labor, import Chinese products, goods, resources. Yeah, that's what those zones are made for, or help with. Then we have the idea of, or the issue, or the topic of Hong Kong in 1997, around the late 90s, 1990s. Hong Kong was no longer a British colony, and it went over to China to take control. But there was this idea of one country, two systems. Hong Kong was to keep, its own ideal system, similar to how it had in the United Kingdom, while China it would be part of China. And that's been under debate recently. There is especially the Umbrella Revolution, which people were upset with, the early 2010s, which people were upset with, how the Chinese were picking the leader of Hong Kong, and they really wanted it to be more locally held. So there were like the protests, and then eventually there was a new, the leader, they made it to be voted on. The leader was to be voted on, but then there were or not, but then like it had to be, the candidates had to be reviewed by like this committee, and eventually, the Chinese government just picked someone new. But yeah, it happened, and there's just been ongoing protests in China. But yeah, this is basically an overview of the government of the People's Republic of China.